Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the September 20th, 2017 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I'm Michael Lee, Chairman of the Commission, and at this time I'd like to introduce the members of the Commission who are here this evening. To my far right, Commissioner Freeman, then Commissioner Henry, and to my immediate right, Commissioner Berg. To my far left, Commissioner Pickus, and then Commissioner Ruggles. Rosemary Kerr is not with us tonight. She was planning to attend, but the fact that we moved the meeting from the regularly scheduled meeting from the 13th to the 20th meant that she this evening couldn't attend because of having to attend to some family matters. So from city staff tonight, we have Kathy Zerniak, our Director of Community Development. And our first item of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, August 9th. I'd like to suggest that we defer action on these to our next meeting. They're fairly long and complicated, and so I think they would bear waiting another meeting to approve those. Okay, our first item on our agenda of substance is a public hearing and action. This is a continuation of a matter that we've heard before, but it's a request for final approval of the final plat of the subdivision for the Saunders Estate subdivision, located on the far southwest part of our city, west of Conway Farms Drive and south of Route 60, immediately adjacent to the Tri-State. At first, I would ask whether or not any members of the commission have any ex-party contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter.
None. No.
Seeing none, we'll proceed. Petitioner, the property owner of CCT LLC Partners. Mr. Plezine, are you here to make a presentation this evening? Please tell us your name and address, please.
My name is Tony Swantek, and I represent Green Guard Engineering. I'm the engineer and also representing the owner tonight.
Okay.
We had previously gone through tentative approval, and since then we have been working with the engineer to finalize our plans and are looking for final subdivision approval. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Kathy, any comments, staff?
Thank you, Chairman Lay, members of the commission. This 4-lot subdivision was before you for consideration of the tentative plat in March. It is a 4-lot subdivision located on the west side of Saunders Road, just east of the tollway. Each of the 4 lots exceeds 40,000 square feet. There's one that's about 45,000 square feet. The subdivision, the tentative plat for the subdivision was considered by the Plan Commission. You held a public hearing. You recommended unanimously approval of the tentative plat, and the City Council accepted your recommendation. As was stated by the petitioner, since that time, the petitioner has been working with the city engineer to dot all the I's, cross the T's. You do have at your place a landscape plan that I neglected to put in the packet. Each of these lots will be sold and developed with individual homes, so landscape plans will, for each of the lots, will come along at that time. As I mentioned, the subdivision is in full conformance with the subdivision regulations, with the exception of the lot to depth ratio. These lots are extra deep, and as we talked about during the tentative phase, because of the location of these lots adjacent to the tollway, the extra depth in the lots allows the homes to be moved forward to Saunders Road, allows the opportunity for each individual property owner to enhance landscaping, for sound attenuation if they desire. So city staff from various departments has reviewed the final plat. finds it to be in conformance with the regulations, the conditions of tentative approval, and we do recommend final approval of the plat of subdivision. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for either petitioner or staff?
Kathy, just one question. At page 2, under the staff recommendations, paragraph 1, under prior to the presentation of the Plan Commission's recommendation, has that been met?
Tell me where you are again.
Page 2, paragraph 1, under prior to presentation of the Plan Commission's recommendation to City Council, following conditions shall be met.
Prior to the presentations of the Plan Commission's recommendation to City Council, the city engineer is looking for a few final tweaks to the final engineering plans. That's why we wrote it that way. We will not move your recommendation forward to the City Council until all of the i's are dotted and t's are crossed. But,
Okay,
but
so
yes, the final engineering plans are generally in conformance. There were just a few pieces of information that he was still looking for.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anybody here who would like to address the commission? It's time for public testimony on the matter. Is there anybody here who would like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Any discussion, comments on the part of the commission? Okay, a motion would be in order regarding the staff report.
Make a motion for final approval of the final plat, the Saunders Estates Lake Forest subdivision, subject to the provisions in the staff report numbered 1 and 2 on page 2.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Who seconded that motion? I missed that. Who seconded?
I did.
Thank you.
Next item is the public hearing and action on the further consideration of a request for approval of a special use permit to authorize the location of a Chase Bank branch and bank drive-through facility on the property on what is now known as the McDonald's property. Banks and drive-through facilities are permitted in the B1 zoning district as special uses. So we have representatives of the petitioner here. Would you like to come forward? And I will swear you in. And those who have both submitted requests to speak and those who haven't but still might want to speak, could you stand as well, and I'll swear you in at the same time. Okay. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are about to give or have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do, yes.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of the entire team, I want to sincerely thank you for having us back tonight to present. I appreciate it. I'm John Krisoff. I'm the Market Director of Real Estate for JP Morgan Chase Bank. I'm in charge of ATM and branch strategy for our greater Chicago region. Our presentation tonight will be a little bit different than last time, of course. We're going to try not to repeat anything that we discussed before. Rather, I'm going to try to focus in on some of the questions that were raised last time. So today I'm going to spend a few minutes presenting first. I'm going to talk a little bit about why Chase needs a branch in the West Lake Forest region, why we feel the West Lake Forest area is a separate and distinct trade area, and why we're confident that it's going to be a great fit for Chase Bank. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this branch will differ a bit from what some of the other branches you might be accustomed to. And then I'm going to introduce Tony Boyce. Tony is the local market director of banking. She's in charge of running our branches in the East Lake County market. And Tony's going to come up and discuss how we're operating now, how this branch will help us serve the Lake Forest community better, and she will address some of our community partnership and involvement efforts. And then lastly, Rory Fansler-Split, our traffic consultant with Kimley Horn, is going to present. She's going to address a few questions that were raised last time. She's also going to address how our traffic should be less intensive, but really more consistent than the former McDonald's use, and it's certainly a frequent and active use, supporting the overall trade area. Like last time, we'll have our partners here from the Architects Partnership TAP. We have our zoning attorney, our plan consultants, a full team here. We're not going to all present, but we'll be available to address any questions that may arise during the Q&A. This map's a little bit hard to see, but first I'd like to address some questions we received last time, is why Chase Bank wants to build a branch here, and show us why this trade area is separate and distinct. So I'm going to start by reviewing with you our Southeast Lake County branch network distribution map, and let me explain a little bit of what you're looking here. Obviously, Lake Michigan is blue on the east. The bottom boundary here, this road here, is Lake Cook, so that's the county line. Right through the middle is the tollway. This large diagonal road is Milwaukee Ave, of course, and then the top of the trade area kind of cuts off the top of the Libertyville trade area and the top of the Lake Bluff trade area, and then this big donut in the middle here. Is where, right in the center, is where we propose this branch, and we would hopefully call it Lake Forest Waukegan Road. If you look on the green boxes, I know they're hard to see. They're little shopping carts. Those all indicate major grocery stores. Not all the little boutique-y ones, but the major grocery stores right across from the proposed location is, of course, Sunset Foods. The new Mariano's is down Waukegan a little bit to the south. The Heinen's in Bannockburn is there. That's also the location of the former Chase Inn store in the Dominick's. In purple are all the major big box retailers to the north and to the west. You can see Costco there. And then in red are all the pharmacies. So these are kind of chart out where the trade areas are, where the retail trade areas are, and some of the other daily needs besides us. A couple of things pop out to me when I look at this map. It's right in the center of the map. It's a pretty big donut hole for us. We find that our customers like to open accounts. They like to have a bank branch within about a 3-minute drive time. If you look at the proposed location to downtown Lake Forest, it's about a 10-minute drive time, or 4 miles, and that's not taken during the time when it's backed up during rush hour and stuff. So besides that, there's significant household densities here. It's all households. It's all mostly residential, and there's folks with considerable banking needs, especially in this demographic. So significant household densities, considerable banking needs. That's an equation for lots of banking demand. Second thing that pops up a little bit is a lot of communities have more than one Chase branch. We have 4 very thriving branches in Highland Park to serve Highland Park and Deerfield. We are in Riverwoods. We're in the inline. We're going to go across the street from the new Woodman's that's under construction right now in a freestanding location. We're going to have 3 branches that serve Buffalo Grove. As you go up Milwaukee, Libertyville, Milwaukee, our branch there, we're under construction right now in a smaller, downsized, more state-of-the-art facility in front of the new Menards. That's also under construction. And then Lake Bluff, we're also under construction in a new freestanding facility. We're reloading a inline that's hard to get to and hard to see to a freestanding bank branch in front of the Target. So I think this shows that we're currently reinvesting and we're really committed to our branch network. Now I'd like to shift to really this local Lake Forest from a more of a Lake Forest perspective. We're zoomed in here a bit. Oh, I forgot to mention, let me go back one second. This is zoomed out quite a bit. This key is 2 miles. It's hard to read. Each of these rings, the diameter of each of those rings is 2 miles. So that gives a sense of the scale. If you go to this, the ring is still a 2-mile ring, but obviously it's much closer. And then the key right there is it's just a mile. So what we're seeing here is, and obviously the lake again. This is Skokie Valley Highway. This is the tollway, and then you can see the proposed New Branch location, and then downtown where we're sitting now. And Waukegan's right here. I'm sorry, it's shaky. These big red blobs that we drew, these are household polygons. This data comes from our branch planning department in Columbus, our branch analytics team. They indicate approximately 7,500 households in the downtown area, and this trade area is about 6,200 households. Obviously, there's a bit overlap outside your city lines going into Bannockburn, maybe in across the highway a bit, and probably outside your city lines going in Lake Forest. And I think households are probably more than just the houses. It's probably, we're finding that's probably adult population potential customers. That's more how we measure the households than the actual physical homes. As you see, really, we find kind of a natural dividing line between these two trade areas is the Skokie Valley Expressway, and we feel there's certainly enough demand, certainly enough support to support another branch in this location. Now I'd like to discuss briefly some of the services offered at this branch and why this branch is just a bit different than some of the other branches in the trade area. While of course we'll have all the typical retail services that other branches offer, but we're really trying to focus on more of an advice center than a transaction center. This is going to be a small 3,600 square foot branch. It's going to have an emphasis on private office meetings in our Chase private client offerings. The teller line will be greatly de-emphasized. That's something we talked about last time. On any given day at this branch, you'll have Chase private client investment advisors offering JP Morgan investment products. We'll have Chase private client bankers opening and managing accounts, home lending advisors supporting the community's lending needs, small business and middle market bankers serving the local businesses in this trade area. And then we'll have staff here to help customers optimize and use the technology that we offer. The branch will support and work with the technology. The technology isn't going to replace bricks and mortar, but the bricks and mortar, of course, will have to evolve, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And one last point about how we differ a bit. Chase has a national presence. So I think we're in a position to uniquely help our customers in this trade area. Let me give you a short personal example before I finish up. When I started with JP Morgan Chase about 8 years ago, I started as a personal banker in our Deerfield branch, right down Waukegan Road. I had a customer who came in with his son who was about to open up, they wanted to open up accounts for both of them because the son was heading off to college. This happens all the time at Chase. It's very common because not only do we have branches locally, but we also have branches in Madison, Wisconsin, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Champaign, Columbus, Bloomington, Indiana, and Bloomington, Illinois, just to name a few. Online is nice, but when there's an emergency, it's great peace of mind to have a branch and have real people within a few minutes from you to help you. And by the way, when I was opening those accounts and we were getting to know each other, and I was saying a little bit about who I was, and they were telling me about themselves, the father told me that they lived in Lake Forest and that he was a senior executive at a major local competitive bank of ours. So I feel strongly that our bank branch network is really not a liability for us. It's really our major competitive advantage. So again, thank you so much for your time, and I'd like to introduce Tony Boyce. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for an opportunity to come and speak. I was really excited to come to be able to put a local face to the project that we are requesting before you. As John said, I'm the market director for the Consumer Bank of JP Morgan Chase. I'm responsible for the retail footprint in the North Shore and here in Lake County. John talked a little bit around this distinct trade areas that we look at when we look at East Lake Forest and West Lake Forest. We've been very fortunate and have had a great relationship with our clients in the community, and our Lake Forest East branch has done very well. So well, in fact, that we're at a capacity issue. John talked a little bit about our future and the future that we're looking to instill in the community of Lake Forest, and we really want to be able to bring more of an advice center to our clients and to your constituents. And right now, at Lake Forest East, there's just not enough space to continue to be able to deliver the type of service that our clients deserve and expect. John touched a little bit around our private client offering. Our Lake County East Market has a lot of branches that offer this particular service to our clients. We find that our clients in this particular trade area really do deserve a little bit extra time and advice when it comes to some more complex issues. And because of that, we want to be able to have the proper amount of staff and associates to be able to meet their needs. And so when we look at the proposed branch, we really want to add additional bankers to be able to service clients. We want to be able to also offer additional home lending needs as well as wealth management advice. And that's really what we think of when we look at this new branch. John touched a little bit around the distinct trade areas, but also around the distance. And we really do feel that the clients in West Lake Forest would definitely benefit from a location that's a little bit closer. John talked a little bit about a 10-minute drive. I've personally driven between the two, especially when school comes out. It's more like a 23-minute drive, I would say, right? You guys all know when school gets out. And so, especially based on the fact that people like convenience, but they also like the ability to have those human interactions, we do feel like it warrants being able to provide that to Lake Forest residents. We've always had a great community partnership with Lake Forest. I know we've opened up our parking deck. I know parking downtown in Lake Forest is very difficult, so we've been able to offer that to the community for events and such things like that. I know also that we're looking for other ways that we might be able to partner with the community to continue to be philanthropic and to continue to help bolster that relationship. Thank you.
Good evening, Rory Fansler Split with Kimley Horn. Kimley Horn prepared the traffic impact study for the proposed redevelopment. The traffic study was prepared per the scope defined by the city using industry accepted practices. As John mentioned, I'm going to touch upon a couple of key points about the traffic study in an effort to address questions raised by the Plan Commission at the last meeting. The traffic study was prepared in order to evaluate the potential traffic impact of site-generated trips on the adjacent roadway network. With this goal in mind, the study was prepared in a manner that resulted in a conservatively high estimate of future traffic volumes. This is important as the study is essentially a stress test for the roadway network. While the intent is to most closely represent future traffic volumes, it is generally preferred to provide a relatively high estimate in order to determine whether the roadway network can support future traffic and where necessary to identify and design appropriate mitigation. In this case, the traffic study demonstrates the estimated traffic volumes would be supported by the existing roadway network and mitigation is not required. This conclusion may be obvious to some, as the staff report noted. The proposed bank is expected to generate less traffic than the previous McDonald's. As part of the traffic study, peak hour counts were conducted at the McDonald's driveways on a typical day when it was open for business. The total McDonald's trips were then compared to the anticipated trip generation for the proposed bank. Data from the Industry Standard Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual was used to estimate bank trips. Supplemental traffic counts conducted at 3 existing Chase Bank branches since the last Plan Commission meeting confirm that ITE data used for the traffic study is generally consistent with the empirical trip generation characteristics of the 3 existing Chase Bank branches. Based on a comparison of total trips, as shown on the screen before you, the bank is expected to generate approximately 34% fewer daily and morning peak hour trips than the previous McDonald's. During the evening peak hour, the bank is expected to generate about 25% more traffic than McDonald's. And midday Saturday, the 2 uses are generally consistent in terms of traffic generation. And I will note, when I say 25% more, I think we're talking about 20 trips. We're not talking hundreds of trips here. So it's all relative to the baseline number. While the bank is expected to generate less total daily traffic, a Chase Bank branch is a frequent and recurring use, as is evident in the traffic count data collected at the 3 existing branches. As shown on the graph before you, the bank use generates traffic throughout the day, and generates traffic generally consistently throughout the day. It's noteworthy that the bank use does not exhibit significant peaks in traffic, as was the case of McDonald's during the morning peak hour shown in the red as a red line. Significant peaks in traffic in many cases can stress the local roadway network, particularly when these peaks coincide with the commute periods when the highest volume of traffic is generally on the road. Based on the analysis presented in the traffic study and the supplemental data collected in advance of tonight's meeting, the proposed bank redevelopment is not expected to negatively impact the roadway network. Furthermore, the bank is expected to generate traffic throughout the day, which introduces the potential for bank customers to visit not only Chase Bank, but also the uses in the surrounding area. At this time, that concludes our formal presentation, and we'll turn it over to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
One supplemental statement before we finish, and just want to mention that in Kathy's memo, it talked about the mural at McDonald's. I want to mention it has been relocated. We were asked to reimburse some of the expenses for relocation, and we did that. So Chase Bank did that. Just want to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one housekeeping matter. I need to ask, do members of the commission have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter? Seeing none, Kathy, would you like to talk about issues or questions?
Thank you, Chairman Lay, members of the commission. You heard an introduction of this matter at your last meeting. This petition is before you because banks are permitted in the B1 district and actually the B2, B3, and B4 district as special uses. The code amendment that established banks as special uses was the code was that a code amendment occurred about 12 years ago or so, and at that time the city council did not intend to close the door, didn't have an interest in, knew that wouldn't be a good idea, didn't intend to close the door on banks, but only to establish additional criteria by which requests for new banks would be reviewed. The first bank that was reviewed under these provisions was the Bank of America, which is located on Western and Wisconsin. And in particular, that bank, the architecture of that bank really reflected one of the criteria that the building must be designed and constructed in a way that lends itself to adaptive reuse in the future. If you drive by that bank today, it has large storefront windows. You could imagine a retail use, perhaps a cafe. That project also created some pedestrian walkways that connected the public parking lot to the west. A pedestrian walkway was created along the north side of the Christensen building, which takes you all the way through to Western. Kept the pedestrians away from the drive-through area. It also offered the opportunity for some storefront windows to be opened on the north side of the Christensen building. So those criteria allowed that project to evolve in a way that really offered some other benefits to the central business district. So again, the intention was not to prohibit banks, not to close the door. Years before real estate offices were made special uses. Again, not because the city council didn't want any real estate offices in the community, but they wanted, if they were going to be located, they wanted to assure that they fit into the character. The central business district, the core of our central business district, is governed by what's called a non-retail rule. So there is a particular area in the community, generally around Market Square, in which non-retail uses are specifically limited to no more than 10% of the first floor square footage. There is no such limitation that governs this property. Clearly, there is a sense in the community that the last thing we need is another bank. We are seeing our business districts evolve, as they always have, to more service businesses, and looking at the proper mix of how do we balance service businesses and offices, and bring people into the area, employees, customers that can then patronize restaurants, other retail establishments that are there. So it's the Plan Commission is charged with a balancing act. The Plan Commission is charged with reviewing this request based on criteria in the code, both the criteria that generally apply to special uses, which speak to traffic and noise and lights and hours of operation, as well as specific criteria that are detailed in the staff report that pertain to the B1 district. And those are the criteria that speak to adaptability of the use, pedestrian connections, community character. Staff did present findings for each of those criteria in your staff report based on our analysis, but what we've heard from the petitioner, the public, the technical studies, our city engineer, our traffic engineer, what we've heard from you, we do believe that this petition does satisfy the applicable criteria. We are suggesting a number of conditions that speak to really looking at the site plan as it continues to evolve, enhancing those pedestrian linkages, making sure that people, if they choose to, can walk from the bank across Waukegan Road and get to Sunset for lunch or to pick up something to take home. Also speaks to the importance of the Building Review Board, assuring that this building, in fact, will be of a timeless design that really lends itself to and it would attract alternative uses if in the future Chase did move out. It also speaks to a recommendation to the City Council that, much like the City Council did when North Shore University Medical Healthcare System took over the Lovell's building, they made a commitment along with Captain Lovell to provide some support for the community, to support infrastructure, landscaping, maintenance in the area. So there is a condition that speaks to that, and that is something that, if you recommend approval, that we would work with the petitioner to detail prior to this going forward to the City Council. I would be happy to answer any questions. I do want to note 2 pieces of correspondence did come in about midday today, and those are both at your place. One from the owner of the commercial establishment to the north, and one from Mr. Cortese of Sunset Foods. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Questions of petitioner, the 3 members who petitioned, or Kathy at this point?
I have a question for Kathy, for city staff. Kathy, when you were mentioning that the eastern central business district around Market Square and the block or 2 around that there is a non-retail exclusionary provision in our ordinance. Now, could you describe the logic for that, the reasoning for that? I mean, I know that there is the tax benefit potentially from that trade in goods generates for the city, sales tax, as opposed to a service. But could you go ahead and speak about other essential elements that might be the reason for that? I mean, were any of those ever presented when that was developed, or please speak of it freely about that if you would.
Probably more so than certainly sales tax revenue is important. Sales tax revenue is not a major portion of the city's total revenue. Probably what is more important and what drove the establishment of the limitation on non-retail uses in the core was to assure that there was some vitality and some synergy and some interaction. Through the years, the city has had a number of business district task force. We've had various consultants develop reports from time to time. And again, we were encouraged to, particularly in the central business district, to consolidate to the extent we could retail uses in the core area and not necessarily let those be strung out the full length of Western Avenue. So I believe the reasoning behind that retail rule at the time it was put in place was really to support the vitality, encourage vitality in the immediate core area.
And by vitality, that would be inclusive of notions of how that has a direct positive influence on familial development, interaction of people during, let's say, shopping and gathering for either meals or coffee. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the idea of humanity, right? And that interaction that helps build a more cohesive bond among members of a community. I mean, that aspect of it, that's the core of it, I believe. That's what I always thought it was. So I just kind of want to establish that as we have discussions tonight, because there's so much logistical information here about parking and potential legal issues because you can't discriminate against a certain type of business. I think it's a very important element here to talk about the humanity aspect. I didn't hear too much discussion about that, and I think for me that's very key here.
And I think you are correct. Certainly in Market Square, which lends itself to pedestrian activity, the establishment of the non-retail rule was to encourage people on the street. Certainly on the west side with a state highway running through that business district, it's of a different character. So yes, the non-retail rule really was intended to support activity on the street.
But at the same time, we don't want to say that if you're on the west side of town, you're a second-class citizen, and that type of development of community character and so forth is less important, maybe more important because of the difficulty of Waukegan Road. Okay, that's all I have right now.
Okay. Further questions? I have a few I'd like to ask of the petitioner. Exhibit A, and you mentioned this in your presentation, you talk about if you add the two service desired trade areas, you come up with over 13,000 households in Lake Forest. The real number is 7,500. So is this 13,000? Is it population? What is it?
It may be. The number, this comes from our national branch planning and analytics and mapping team in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't come up with it myself, and this is how we kind of generate, and I can look into that, but I think it's probably, it could be people, not necessarily, kids and things, but people that are potential customers. Some of them are existing customers, some are not customers. But I think it's probably more in line with people. Also, there's an overlap. There's definitely going into, we're looking at trade areas, in the downtown trade area, we're looking at the trade area here. And there's definitely overlap to Bannockburn and other communities. So it's outside your city limits, but we're trying, those folks will probably come in. We see them coming in to use the bank branch.
So you see this
into that
as
trade area.
drawing customers from not only Lake Forest, but outside of
I
Lake
think so, we hope so, yeah.
Because, I mean, the numbers just don't jive.
No, and and I'll look into that, but I don't think it's just, I don't think it's just homes. I think it's households that they're defined, might be defined differently.
Second question is, your attorney's letter, and Tony mentioned that the western Lake Forest trade area is distinct from the trade area served by our downtown Lake Forest branch. By what measure is it distinct, other than which side of town it's located?
Absolutely. So yes, geography would be the major reason, right? Because of traffic and distance. But also, I think we talked a little bit around too, just in my time being up here, the east and west sides do seem different, right? So there are less retail establishments. There seems to be a little bit less parking in some areas. There does seem to be more areas where there's more shopping, where there's more areas where people are congregating. And so I do feel like that, and also just where schools are, the general traffic pattern that people are driving down, make it a little bit different when we look at the east and the west side from a client base.
Okay, thank you. Further questions?
I
Mike?
just had a couple for Ms. Fansler, is that you pronounce it? So in the updated traffic report, you did take actual measurements of the traffic that was coming in and out of this particular site while the McDonald's was operating, right? Those are actual numbers.
In the traffic study, correct.
And you measured, I think we mentioned last time at the last Plan Commission meeting, also traffic that was cutting across from the property that's located directly to the north, those retail establishments that are to the north. Were you asked to take any measurements for the property to the south, the private bank that's to the south?
We did not. Wait, I may stand corrected. Let me double check.
And while you're looking, either the private bank to the south, the bank that's immediately south of that bank, Fifth Third, or the bank that's across the street, Lake Forest Bank and Trust, any of those three, did you take actual measurements?
No, we took measurements at the 3 existing Chase Bank branches as documented in that supplemental, but we did not take measurements at other banks,
Okay,
non-Chase banks.
thank you.
No questions.
Okay.
Who owns the property just to the north, the shopping center that was built about 15 years ago?
Green
Okay.
Court Partners, I believe you have a letter from a representative from Green Court in front of you.
Kathy, I have a question for you. This request does not have a drive-through banking capability. It has an ATM. If they would change their mind at some point, would they have to come back for approval to put in a,
My sense is that it would, if we
Okay.
write the special use permit in a way that specifically refers to the exhibit, the site plan that defines the drive-through as an ATM, that we would probably want it to come back if there were significant changes.
okay. And my last question is, in page 2 of your attorney's letter, and Tony, you mentioned this, staffing will be investment advisors, private client bankers, home lending advisors, and management. Will all of that staff be there in the facility on day one that it opens?
Yes.
Okay. Not something that's going to be phased in as demand dictates?
So for our initial staffing model, when we do decide and get permission to open a new location, we generally start hiring, recruiting, getting the very best candidates from the community somewhere about 3 to 4 months prior to our opening, so that the branch is fully staffed with the original staffing model. And then if we do see a need for maybe additional teller services or additional home lending advisors, then we would always look to determine whether or not it would make sense for us to increase our staff level based on that need. But we would have a full staff model in place by the day we open.
Okay, thank you. Okay. No further questions at this point? Okay. Time for public testimony. You've been sworn in. The first registrant that I have is and I'm not sure, is it Deb Belor? 110 Pine Oak Circle. Did you wish to address the commission?
Want me to do it here?
Please come up to the podium. Thank you.
What I was trying to write on there is, I don't like to speak publicly. I'm only here because I'm on a number of local Facebook groups, and there's a lot of moms in our community that have children, they have activities, they would love to be here, they can't be here. So since I'm past that phase in my life, I'm here to basically say a few things. I have nothing against Chase, it's not about Chase. I guess the question is, in an era where the trend is less brick and mortar, why do we need another bank? Can you have a community and character that's only made of real estate offices and banks? I feel like it's not the Lake Forest it was when I moved here 20 years ago. And I thought it was kind of telling, John, what you said. You said you're confident it would be a great fit for Chase. I'm sure it would be. I think the issue is it a great fit for Lake Forest? And I guess I fly in the face of your statistics because I actually have an account now in East Lake Forest, Chase. I'm very happy to drive there. I have no problem with that. I've had an account at Citibank for years. There's no Citibanks in Lake Forest. I drive to Northbrook, I drive to Vernon Hills because truthfully, you don't have to go to a bank very often anymore. And I do have a safe deposit box at our Lake Forest Bank because they are a local bank. And as much as I have nothing against Chase, in my few interactions, it's very clear the people are lovely, they're wonderful, but it is a bureaucracy. It is not a true local bank. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Mary O'Donnell, 1184 Lynette, and she will be followed by, is it Charles Kraken?
I agree with the woman who spoke before. I too moved to Lake Forest 17 years ago. 17 years ago, it was a different era. It was a different area where I live. I do not feel that there is a need for a fourth bank with all the new technology. An awful lot of people don't even enter a bank. So I question that. I also question that I have a feeling that West Lake Forest is the stepchild of East Lake Forest, and I am not alone in that sentiment. So I just raised that question. I raised the question, is there a need for another bank? And I let it go at that.
Thank you, Mary. Is it Charles Kraken or Kracann? Anybody come close to that? Okay. If you change your mind, come on up. Next is Steve Douglas, 460 Washington Road, be followed by Bill Mackesy.
Hi, as you said, Steve Douglas, 460 Washington, and I represent the owner of Forest Square just to the north of the property. First of all, I want everyone to remember that the west side, I've been in Lake Forest for 30 years, and so I remember I used to go to the Fiore Nursery, which was great, but I remember that, at that time, a lot of the homes around there weren't even built, and, they were, it was still farms and so forth. So the whole area has evolved, and it's still evolving, and it couldn't possibly, look like East Lake Forest yet because it's so much younger. So let's just kind of remember that. So anyway, since the multi-use project at Forest Square opened in 2008, we've enjoyed a wonderful relationship with having McDonald's as a neighbor. We shared cross-access easements between the two properties so that our customers the customers at both could enjoy easy access and back and forth and so forth. And we enjoyed the fact that the retail draw of both properties benefited the other. You know, we had a symbiotic relationship, if you will. So we do regret the departure of McDonald's, but however, you know, we recognize that it's just economic reality, that restaurants in the area have struggled to be profitable. You know, perhaps there are just too many of them, especially in the face of rising operating costs, taxes, labor wages, et cetera. Looking at Forest Square, there's an end cap unit just to the north of the McDonald's site. And in the last 9 years, we've had no fewer than 3 restaurants in that same space, just because, you know, it's just been tough for them to survive. And perhaps, you know, for this very same reason, perhaps Lovell's would still be located in Settlers Square if there were more demand for restaurants in West Lake Forest. So, but we're sorry to see McDonald's go, but we're taking the more positive view and hoping that this natural economic evolution will drive more business to the remaining food venues at both Forest Square and at Sunset Corners, allowing all of them to become more economically viable. It's been mentioned that there's been a lot of change in retail too, with the advent of and tremendous growth of online shopping. And at Forest Square, each year we've had fewer and fewer traditional retailers because they've struggled to compete with those online options. So in their place, we've had to lease to service providers such as the Hearing Lab, ABC Cleaners, Envision Health, Superior Pilates, Tips to Toes, SJ Studio, and our most recent tenant opening hopefully by the end of the year, Deca Lash, an eyelash studio. So the good thing for the city is that most of these tenants still sell retail products, so they're generating some sales tax. And I think we're lucky that the Lake Forest residents have embraced all these services, and so our retail space is once again 100% leased. But it's because of this fundamental change in the retail economy that the highest and best use for the McDonald's site is now a service-oriented use. And we believe, you know, given that, we believe that Chase Bank will be a great neighbor, attracting new potential customers to our retailers and to those of Sunset Corners. It'll also be unique in West Lake Forest as a branch of a major national bank. Kimley Horn's traffic study shows that similar Chase branches attract, well, I saw on the graph, 500 customers per day. So that's not only frequent and repetitive use, but it illustrates strong demand from the community. And Chase has shown that West Lake Forest does represent a void in their branch network, which they need to fill to satisfy this demand. And this level of customer traffic is certainly going to benefit surrounding retailers, not only at Forest Square, but also at Sunset Corners. And I do believe that that does advance the purpose of the B1 district. So I think in conclusion, we believe that a service-oriented business like Chase is currently the highest and best use for the property, given the economic realities of today. We're confident with the guidance of the BRB, what is already a handsome design can be refined such that the building will be adaptable for future uses if that should ever become necessary. With that potential future change in mind, we would encourage Chase to maintain all existing parking in conjunction with making any excess parking available for other uses, as the staff recommended in their report. And we would definitely welcome an opportunity to open new pedestrian pathways between the two properties, and this might help address Commissioner Berg's concern. You know, Forest Square has the nice pedestrian arcade, and we'd like to somehow extend that so that pedestrian traffic could go to the south. So finally, we applaud Chase for their demonstrated commitment to community involvement, and we look forward to the possibility of having them as our new neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Mr. Mackesy? And following him will be Philip Falk.
Hello, I'm Bill Mackesy. I lived in Lake Forest since 1980. That makes it 37 years. I think the best use of that property is a McDonald's. But as life goes on, I've been there, as most of you know, for 20 years. In fact, the last time I was in front of this group was 20 years ago when I tried to get the okay to build a store there. For some of you may have remembered. That was a battle went on indefinitely, and then I got the store. Then I had to build that type of a building, which was very expensive. Then I had to wait a year before they'd give me a drive-through. So I had to wait another year. So I've got more money in that store than you have in this whole building. But having said that, I never wanted to leave Lake Forest. I've lived here. I wanted to keep a store here. And some of the articles that have been in the paper almost indicate that I just decided to close the store and move on. And the reason I think that some of those rumors got started is because about 2 years ago, I owned 47 McDonald's. And because of my age, I started throttling back, and probably I have about, 23 stores right now. And the impression out there was, from people that have come up to me, that I'm selling a bunch of stores and I decided to close this store too. That is not the fact. I'd still be there. In fact, I have no opinion one way or the other whether Chase should go in that spot or not. That's up to you people. But I just wanted to clear the record here to let you know, and these people to know, that I did not leave voluntarily. Frank Mariani and I had a tentative agreement. The lease was up, the 20 years lease was up, and Frank's not here, but I didn't make the last meeting, so I don't know what he said. But we had a tentative agreement of what the new rent was going to be. Now, I don't make the decision whether we stay there or not. McDonald's Corporation makes it. But they come and talk to me about it. And so I was going to try to make it work with the new rent that we tentatively agreed on. We did not have it in writing. But I felt I could make it work because I wanted to be in Lake Forest, and I didn't care if I broke even. I wasn't in it to make money. I just felt that Lake Forest should have a McDonald's. So did my wife, and so did her friends. So to keep peace in the family, maybe I would have run it at a loss. Having said that, Frank and I had a tentative agreement. Then he came back to my office about 2 weeks later and said that a bank had proposed to go on this site, and the figure that we agreed on, not agreed, it was a tentative agreement. I don't want to misspeak here because it was not in writing. But the bank offered more than twice that what Frank and I talked about. So having said that's why McDonald's normally, 95% of the time, own the land. This is what happens when you rent property and the lease gets up, terminates, and then the landlord, needless to say, may raise the rent. That happens in the city of Chicago all the time. They close a lot of stores because the rents go up. Well, that's what happened here. And I just wanted to clear the deck here so that people know that this is not enjoyable to me. There's been 4 or 5 articles in the local papers about what happened, and they're talking about the murals taking down, and we put a lot of time and effort in that store. But with the new rent to match what, even if we did match what the bank would be paying, the store needs to be remodeled now, inside and outside. And because of the size of the building, and with the interior, what's got to be changed, even if I could have broke even, I couldn't have broke even and done the remodel. If Frank and I would have agreed on the original rent, we probably would still be there. But business is business, and I just want you people to know that I did not leave voluntarily, that I would have loved to have stayed there. So, and it's not like we had to leave because we weren't making ends meet. We were making ends meet, And being there 20 years, I would have renewed the lease. So, and I said I'd come up here. I think I sent a letter. If anyone had any questions as to what happened, or do you have any questions about why we closed, that's basically it. But I don't want to take any more time. I just wanted to clear the record.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Maxey. Your comments explain quite a few things. Okay, next person, Phil Falk, and then following him will be Ed Pesquisi.
I don't attend any of these meetings, et cetera. I just think it's a real tragedy what's happening to West Lake Forest. We've been there, built our house in 1999, and you know, in his presentation, he doesn't show, you know, Lake Forest Bank and Trust and the private bank and the other banks, and you guys are destroying west side of Lake Forest. That's how we look at it. And my neighbors, I'm in Conway Farms, they're not here, but I'm representing them, and they all feel the same way. We're really pissed, you know, and we love Bill Mackesy, you know, we love Bill Mackesy and his McDonald's. I mean, it's great. But when Jay Lovell left, you know, it's a big hole. And why is, you know, everyone's going to feel that the west side of Lake Forest is a dumping ground, and that's it. I mean, it's like with real estate taxes and, you know, the highway noise and the railroad noise and everything else going on. It's like, you know, why live in West Lake Forest? You know, you live in the state of Illinois. It's depressing enough with all the bankruptcies and, you know, the government being under. And, you know, we understand Chase. I mean, I do charity work, and we own Chase accounts for that. But it's just the wrong fit. And for you guys, you know, I heard that Starbucks wanted to move in and build a really nice Starbucks like what's on the east side of Lake Forest. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't follow any of this. So I just come here and just say that it's a real tragedy what you guys are, if you guys are going to approve Chase to be a bank in the west side of Lake Forest. We need restaurants. We need something happening. You know, the gas station in the Pesquisi over there is like a dumping ground. It's been there for so many years. It just looks like shit. Everything looks terrible, you know. And for you guys to approve this, it would be, everyone's going to be, so the majority of people are going to be up in arms over it.
Thank you, Mr. Pesquisi, and then following him will be Dan Sebald.
At Pasquesi, I live at 30 North Alani Road in Lake Forest, and my family owns Pasquesi Home and Gardens. January 1 will be 11 years since we have left our original location. We left because we needed to expand, and we didn't own the property. It was a great location with great customer base. I always thought that it would have been a good location for a restaurant, and I never imagined it would have been vacant for so long. So relating that to the location, the McDonald location, and as a resident of Lake Forest and as a retailer, I certainly would love to see a business that could produce some sales tax for our city. But the reality is that in this very serious competitive environment where there are a lot of stores, where there are a lot of restaurants, I would question very seriously whether a retailer or a restaurant will be able to pay the going rate for that location, where a bank can and would be able to offer a long-term lease. So, unfortunately, we see too many stores and too many restaurants go out of business. We don't see that and banks. So for that reason, I would favor a Chase Bank. They're able to pay the market rate and certainly provide a long-term lease. We've seen that play in the downtown Lake Forest a few years ago, where key retail spots, several of them, are occupied by banks. And I think this is no different. It's just the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. After Dan will be Jerry Jacks.
Dan Sebald, 560 Ivy Court. Last time I was here, I was kind of neutral on this project, but I thought Commissioner Freeman made some very good points and kind of swayed me a little bit last time. And I'll come back to my feelings on this later. But in the discussion that followed public testimony last time, I felt that the property owner had emphasized that in Bannockburn there was a new McDonald's, which was a big reason for the problems with getting the McDonald's in there again. And if that was the case, that's like franchise encroachment, and that's something that I kind of wish the owner would have brought this whole issue to the city sooner, and that was one of the points that Commissioner Freeman raised, was the brevity at which this Chase Bank proposal has appeared. My main concern, and I'll just emphasize my main concern and why I would either oppose this or propose postponing it, is that this bank is just not a very good use of that lot. It's too small. There's too much parking. That lot is suitable for a bigger business, and the bank has a drive-through. It's automobile-oriented. I don't know what the status is on the pedestrian underpass of the railroad track, but and I'm glad to see people from the community come out this time and show they really do. They do want to see livable communities. And I either deny the special use permit or postpone it for 6 months to see if some other business can come forward and express interest in this lot, this bigger lot, and have one of the elders serve as a liaison to get feedback from the community, what it is they would like to see there in terms of services or retail or whatever it is. And that feedback could then maybe entice other businesses into the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
So I'm Jerry Jacks. I've lived in Lake Forest for 67 years. I lived in West Lake Forest for 67 years. I'm a beneficial owner of the private bank building. I owned a Century 21 office for 10 years. It was on both sides of Waukegan Road. And so I come to you to say that I speak with some tenure and some knowledge about the area, having lived there. I think it's very nice that we discuss what should be done with other people's property. I mean, this parcel is very small. It can't support much in the way of business there. It certainly can't support any more retail. It's too small. To have a bank, the publicly traded bank, to go in there, at least the city would be assured that whatever was put in there will be there for some time, rather than a business that fails. As far as the McDonald's leaving, with all due respect to that, you know, if you went down Waukegan Road to About Waukegan Old Mill, that's about the distance it takes to eat a Big Mac and order french fries and a Coke, and that's where the garbage is. I mean, I think this is a much better use for the property. I mean, be honest with you, I don't exactly know why we need another bank, but obviously Chase must feel that it's a viable operation for them. And I think that there's people in Westlake Forest have been treated forever as second citizens out there, and if they want to bank at Chase, God bless them for it. And I think that it's always easy to discuss somebody else's property. I mean, you can't get a local business. You couldn't support a restaurant. Lovell's couldn't do it. He couldn't give the place away. He couldn't make it into another restaurant. It was Walker Brothers took a look at it. They couldn't do anything with it. So I'm in support of this. I mean, banks are banks. I think they're good use, and I think it's a less impact on the entire neighborhood there. And you're not going to have the night traffic that's there now, that was there. And lastly, the building is a dump. I mean, if somebody was to buy that or to continue to lease it, it would take millions of dollars to put the building back in shape. It's had deferred maintenance forever. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to testify? Please come forward. Is there objection to hearing from Bill second time? Go ahead.
I'm sorry if you
No. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say a couple things. Yes, the building needs work now. The reason I haven't put any more money in the building is because I knew of this, we're going to lose our lease. But I don't operate stores like that. I have 47 stores. I've never closed a one. I've sold 20-some, but I've never closed a store. This would be the first one. If we didn't lose our lease, the whole place was going to be remodeled. That's number one. Now, people talk about the store that was built in Bannockburn. The reason that store was built in Bannockburn is because they offered it to me, and I turned it down. I didn't like the site, number one, and number two, it wasn't in Lake Forest. I was only interested in building a new store if it would have been in Lake Forest. So the owner of that store is owns some other ones in Highland Park, but that store was only built because McDonald's determined, even before this whole thing started, that we wouldn't be able to afford the amount of money that the landlord was going to ask for that site. If I was able to work out a deal with Frank Mariani, I could have stopped that deal and we'd have kept the McDonald's there. But because what he was asking and what he ultimately would be getting from the bank, there's no way fast food restaurant could have paid that kind of rent. But that store was only built because of the situation that happened at the Lake Forest site. So I just wanted to clear that up. But I agree, the building now needs work, needs more work now because it's closed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Final questions from the commissioners to either petitioner or staff, or direction to staff, request for additional information.
There was some mention made in the submittal, I think it was from staff, that mentioned that the new tenants or the new owners over at the old Lovell site were going to make some effort to either donate some, I'm not sure what it was, but there was going to be some kind of a payback to the community based on some conviction that perhaps the vitality of the area for their business was sort of a result of our TIF district, reality.
North Shore University Healthcare Systems, as part of the special use permit, did offer and does provide some support for maintenance of the streetscape in that immediate area. and some of the other infrastructure. So yes, there is a non-sales tax contribution that was agreed to and is made by that business.
I guess I would ask Mr. McKessie, of the 47 McDonald's that you're a franchisee, where did the Lake Forest store rank? Same store sales year over year compared to the 47 other McDonald's franchises that you have?
It's in the lower quarter.
Can you be a little more specific than that? You can just tell me.
Well, yeah, are you talking about volume?
Same store sales vis-a-vis the other 47 franchises that you have.
Average volume of McDonald's in Chicagoland, if you put them all together, or even my stores, it comes to about 2.7 million. This one was close to 2 million. So it would not be, does that answer your question?
I guess would it be fair to say it was the lowest performing store of all your franchises? That maybe is my question.
There's gas stations, and I've got all kinds of stores. It probably would be one of my lower volume freestanding stores, but it still made cash flow. That's all I care about, okay?
Bill, was the number you gave us, is that an annual number?
I'm sorry?
Is that number you provided an annual or a monthly number?
Annual.
Okay.
Okay, did you get the answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, what's the pleasure of the commission? We have a staff report with a recommendation to approve. Kathy, I have a couple of questions with respect to the report. On page 3 of the staff report, you talk about items number 3 and 4. Are those, first of all, under 3, it said the Building Review Board could be directed to consider such and such. And then under 4, it says, it talks about, or my question is that number 4, should that be a condition brought down under the conditions? Was that your intent?
Certainly, if the conditions aren't clear enough regarding enhanced pedestrian links, refining the site plan in a way that provides for connections to other pedestrian paths off-site, then the conditions should be modified or enhanced. With respect to the Building Review Board, again, if the condition that speaks to the Building Review Board doesn't fully reflect what the commission would like the Building Review Board to focus on. The idea is that the Building Review Board certainly focuses on architectural design and detailing, massing roof forms, materials, but in this case, because of the special use permit criteria for future adaptability, that could also be considered by the board.
Taking a second look at number 5, it's included. Number 3, that's already included, so. Okay, what's the pleasure of the commission?
Well, could I make a open deliberation before
Sure.
we try to make a motion? It's interesting input tonight. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and the comment that was just recently made about it's interesting to try to tell somebody what to do with their property, and I take that to heart. There's a couple things here. Is that the rent now is elevated for that property, but that's with the notion that a special use permit would be granted. If it wasn't, then perhaps that rent wouldn't be so high as it is now, assumed to be. Correct? I mean, if the bank couldn't rent it, that would suddenly be on the market for less money. You see what I mean? So it's it's kind of an artificial, at this particular moment, assumed rent. That being said, on one hand, I would probably be a lot more receptive to this petition if it had tried to, and this falls into this, maybe trying to work with the West Side from a community standpoint, which might fall into this, how do you pay back for having benefited from the original agreement, to have a tax increment financing. I mean, that's helped elevate the property values of all these businesses over the last couple decades so that they can be marketable today. If this petition had sort of been tailored to become the south bracket or the south arm of the current square that we have now, which I think is pretty successful from an aesthetic standpoint, that would probably make it more appealing to me rather than just another island building surrounded by its parking lot, its orbit, and another one next to that, and another one next to that. When we reviewed the shopping center with its tower on BRB, we were really, I think, excited about the fact that this sort of established kind of a town center for the west side of Lake Forest, rather than the kind of strip mall thing you'd see if you were driving through another community, like Deerfield or something like that. It would help distinguish some character. Now, I can't say we're going to have East Side Market Square on the west side, but it would be an interesting concept, even though maybe you don't even link the two buildings, but maybe the design has a lot more of the language of the one that's there now, so that for the passerby or the person who's actually visually embracing, it becomes more of a composition that represents a whole. And again, maybe I'm trying to tell people how to spend their money, but on the Plan Commission, maybe these ideas can be incorporated to make a better final product. And not only that, rather than have a standalone building that seems to upset people because it's an object building and it's a bank and an island, if it looked like it was an arm of an existing composition where, the building design is at the service of the land design, maybe then that building could transition to another establishment and gain sort of viability because it looks like it's part of a bigger whole. And I really think that's kind of important out in Westlake Forest, for it to get an identity that's of that part of town.
Isn't that sort of the purview of the BRB, though, what you're suggesting?
Actually, the problem with this, by trying to sort of segregate the two boards, I was on the BRB, and I tell you, there were times when I'd pull my hair out because we'd get stuff from the Plan Commission, and you couldn't do anything about it. It was kind of a fait accompli. And I think there's a danger in sort of saying, no, that's not your purview, that's someone else's purview. I mean, good design and good environment, I think, is the objective of all of our commissions. And I'm not trying to say this to put you down at all. This is a serious conviction that I don't know what the solution to it is, but I'm saying this actually because we're going to ask Kathy if maybe she could put this in the minutes or as a recommendation from myself.
Can I make an addition to that? I think in this particular case, and Guy, you and I usually agree, we've had the benefit of two neighboring property owners. I think you make the assumption that those properties have increased in value, and I think they've come and said, both Mr. Jackson and Mr. Douglas own the buildings right next door, have told you that this is the reality of these types of buildings. The market is not conducive to traditional retailing. We had Mr. Mariani, the property owner, come, and while it was somewhat contradicted today by the franchisee, it was an dramatically underperforming store.
Well, wait a minute. In fairness, he said he didn't know anything about it.
But Tim, I'm not arguing any of that.
This is the same people who sat up here 20 years ago who said make the McDonald's look like a barn is one of the reasons they didn't sell a lot of hamburgers there. People who aren't from here would drive by because we were trying to say, that we don't want a McDonald's in Lake Forest. Well, one of the reasons the store underperforms, and I know for a fact it clearly underperforms, is because we tried to tell McDonald's how to design a fast food place. I think we very rarely have the benefit as the Plan Commission to have people who their private businesses are to own these commercial buildings, and they come to our meetings to support this particular use. When there's, in all truth, there's no benefit for those guys to come here and say that. They're saying, look at what we got. We had Ed Pasquesi come and say, my old site, has been empty for 11 years. He took all of his revenue, doubled the size of his store, and moved it to Lake Bluff with the Maserati dealer and everybody else. I mean, I appreciate people's understanding and attempts to, tell these guys what they should do we have zoning laws. The reasons the special use has been explained 10 times on this particular development about why it requires a special use. I understand that people, want to have better uses. Well, the fiscal reality of what this site is.
Tim, I get all this,
absolutely.
but you know what? I'm not arguing with the special use at all.
But
I'm offering possibly a little bit better opportunity here to maybe incorporate the development so that it benefits the longevity of whatever's built there. It helps. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that that it should be a
and
McDonald's.
you have a viable tenant who's going to spend $4.5 million to build a building. I encourage everybody to go through the steps of the BRB and build a good building, a good design. I'm not at all concerned with the design at this point.
So
but
can I
I
just
think we have to kind of understand what's the reality on how this is all coming down.
I just want to make 2 points of order, because I hear what you're saying, but I think to get back to Commissioner Pickus's point, to send this to BRB, we have to first look at all of the criteria, and 2 of the criteria, 3 and 4, 3, that it's demonstrated that the building can be adapted to a different additive use in the future, right? And 4, that for new buildings, that the development provides pedestrian links between the development and nearby retail uses. So that is absolutely the function of this plan commission, is to make sure that those 2 things are met. So I think Commissioner Berg's comments about connectivity to the neighboring property are absolutely the kinds of things that we're supposed to decide before we hand it off to BRB. And as it relates to adaptive uses in the future, I don't know how any of you can look at that building and go ahead and put a little block over the Chase name and tell me you see anything but a bank. I mean, it's a bank. I don't know how you can look at that building and tell me that it's anything but a bank. And the building to the south of it is a bank, and it looks like one. And the building to the south of that is a bank. And so if we're going to talk about adaptive uses, I think Kathy makes an excellent point about looking at Bank of America on the east side and saying, now that's a building that has adaptive uses. This building, in my view, does not have future adaptive uses other than another bank, or a retail or an office space that doesn't mind working in an office space that looks like a bank, because that's what it is. So those are the kinds of things that I think are more than just directions to BRB and handing it off to BRB. It's saying, what's been presented tonight, does it meet those 2 criteria? That's where I get stuck. I also get stuck, we've had discussions around this, and last time we were here, we talked about need, and we specifically asked that the traffic patterns on the existing properties to the south and across the street be measured, and they were not measured. So instead, what we got was what other Chase banks in other areas that aren't surrounded by other banks, what kind of traffic they get. I don't find that helpful in the record. The standard is that, our courts have never looked at whether or not a plan commission or city could exercise zoning power to prevent overdevelopment of one particular use. There's just it's never been stated. But there could be an overuse. That argument could be made. And we have to look at these criteria, and it's proper for us to consider the uses to which the surrounding property is or may be put, all banks, the care with which the community has undertaken to plan its land use development, and evidence or lack of evidence of a community need. And certainly traffic would be evidence of community need, and it has not been presented to us despite the fact that we specifically asked for it. Need can't be the only criteria, but it can be one of them. And these other criteria I don't think are met either. And I'm pleased that Mr. McKessie came in and set the record straight, because I do think that there was, certainly in the way it was presented, the potential for confusion. So I was pleased and for people to come forward in the community and talk about what it is that we've lost. I think I live on the west side of Lake Forest, and I struggle with a development that doesn't meet these criteria, because What I wouldn't want to see in 5 years from now is a bunch of empty office space on the west side of Lake Forest. We need to hang on to the retail, and I hear what the retailers are saying. Retailers are struggling everywhere. But look, so are banks. They're closing left and right, these branches. So we can't pretend that retail's closing and banks aren't. So we need to be conscientious about it. And the idea about whether, who are we to tell property owners? We have an obligation to this community to engage in conscientious land planning. And that's what this community has done, and that's why this community thrives. And we have established a business district with multi-use. The city was very thoughtful in the planning of this, and property owners benefited because of that planning. And those same property owners shouldn't come in here and expect that they're due some additional favors from the city. We need to do something that's proper land planning, and we shouldn't pick winners or losers. But if the only criteria, Tim, is who pays the highest rent, God forbid what we'd have along that strip of road if that's the criteria.
I hear your comments, but it was the same type of special use that had that building built the way that it was. They got a special use permit to have a drive-through, and the adaptive reuse is it's being torn down.
Yeah, which is
Less than would be the normal life of a commercial building.
Kathy?
But the enthusiasm that these guys have, though, this is good. This is good deliberation. I don't think it's out of control at all. And both of you raise excellent points. And Tim, what you're saying now is that actually you're agreeing with both of us in that this is our opportunity now is to say, let's not put up another object building, which is Chase Bank will be. It will be. And maybe what we need to do is think big picture down the road. It's like the Whole Foods. Everybody said, I want the Whole Foods, but you can't bank on that. They could pull out at the last minute. We'd have an empty building or another tenant that wouldn't make it. I don't look at these tenants really saying, I like one better than the other or the other one. I look at it as environment. These buildings, can they always stand alone and make it? And I think my comment about maybe incorporating their shopping center, that I'm telling them what to do. Yeah, I'm suggesting it. I'm hoping maybe they'll listen and they'll say, hey, that might help us out. But I think it's okay for us to try to improve on what didn't work. So you got to be careful. You tear the McDonald's down, but you might be just putting another one up too,
Kathy?
You guys are so smart. That's the problem with this.
Kathy, I have a question on the procedure here. Could this commission add another condition in addition to sending it off to the BRB if the commission so chose, to say that it has to come back to us to review whether or not what they approved, disapproved, meets the adaptive reuse condition?
Certainly, the commission can continue the matter if you choose to do that, leave the public hearing open. I think that's what was suggested by staff last month, was that we do go to the Building Review Board, because in the past, when we've done that iterative process at the front end, it has led to a more direct conclusion or expeditious conclusion. So certainly, if you wanted to identify particular criteria that you can't make a finding on until the work of the Building Review Board is done, you could certainly do that. The appropriate way to do that would be to continue the petition on specific items.
Rather than getting a sense of the commission as we send it off to BRB. In other words, what I'm suggesting is the possibility of approving the motion in support, subject to it going to BRB, and then coming back and that we find acceptable the adaptive reuse criteria being met.
And then could we add the parking criteria too?
If you like.
That Michael brings up, that I am quick to just assume that the delta between McDonald's and the bank is so great with regards to parking and traffic, that he did ask specifically to get the counts from the other surrounding like businesses that we didn't get. So I think I would agree with you. That was,
yeah, but
that was a catch that I didn't really.
I would question that the traffic counts for the McDonald's were taken will you accept the fact that a bank going into the same location will have less than the current
I do.
McDonald's?
I think it's significantly less than what's been represented, which is why I asked the question last time, and Chairman Lay asked it as well. I think it's significantly less, and I think it goes to the factor of need. I mean, again, not need in and of itself is not determinative, but it's something we should be thinking about. I mean, and
So it'll be less because there's existing banks there already, so there'll be fewer people
and
going
I think
there.
those existing banks don't get much traffic to begin with. So I think that's what I'm arguing is I think if I were allowed to hand select of the 16 Chase banks that are within 6 miles of this property, and which is what's been done in this presentation, I think you can make it look different. And I'm just curious to know what happens in Lake Forest, not in remote areas of Lake Forest. I mean next door. I'd like to know what happens. That I think is
I'll
indicative of
reluctantly
need.
agree to his point.
You know, it's their evidence to present.
Right.
I don't.
No, and we,
you know,
and
I
we
just
did
think-
ask, so let's get
I just
it.
think that it
In addition
doesn't-
to what you had said, that with the caveat on the building design, again, I would agree that, like with the parking, I just assume that the BRB is gonna do a good job, and if you guys aren't cool with that, I would support your desire to get a second look, get a recheck.
So the question for the commission is, do we want to just continue the hearing, send it off to BRB, or do we want to give the BRB some sense of we approve the tentative agreement subject to the traffic and the adaptive reuse and other conditions?
Well, I guess a better question, or a question to ask first is if we were satisfied that the building design lent itself to adaptive reuse, as Commissioner Freeman mentioned, would everybody be good with that?
Well, and also, I mean, shouldn't the petitioners have an idea from the board if we're even in favor of, you know, moving this petition forward? Like, what's our thought on it?
Right.
And on my part, you know, as a plan commissioner, I believe my role is to review the criteria for special use, which staff has done a great job of outlining that in our staff report. We have line by line, you know, the 7 items that are the criteria that are to be met, and then the explanation to us if they have or have not. Now, there are some items that are in question, you know, the adaptability of the building, the pedestrian walkway, but I do think that it would be important for us to kind of give the petitioner an idea if, you know, just send it to BRB and then it comes back and then we say no. That's not really fair.
Chairman Lay, I could offer that in the cases of some petitions in the past, the commission has continued the matter and left specific issues open. So all of the other items have been addressed, and the sense I'm getting from this board is that the issues, the findings that you are not convinced are fully met have to do with the adaptability of the building, the pedestrian links and connections to surrounding properties, and questions about the traffic study. So if you wanted to, in response to Commissioner Ruggles, give an indication of what those open issues are, and then the public hearing would be left open specifically on the items that you identify. And that would provide direction to the Building Review Board as well on what items they should be focusing on.
So
I'd be in favor of that.
Just to be clear, the reason I'm interested in the traffic study is because I am concerned about the uses of the surrounding properties, the care that we've taken to build this B1 district in the multi-service way that we have, and I'm concerned about this particular use and the lack of evidence of community need for the use proposed by this petitioner. So that's why I'm interested in the traffic study. So I don't want to make it sound like, I mean, I agree with you completely, Commissioner Pickus. It's going to be less traffic. My concern is it might be so little traffic that it doesn't meet the purposes of the ordinance.
What's your use argument?
Right.
But
So
what part of the criteria are we looking at that says why
Well,
is this use needed?
So again,
Which number is that?
there's a number of steps in the analysis. The purpose of the district, right, which we talked about last time, is that this be for the frequent and repetitive use of the neighboring community. And while use isn't determinative in and of itself, it is a criteria that we should consider. Is there a need for this in the community? Is that the sole consideration? No. Then you go to these other things and you say, does it meet, will it have an adverse impact on the community? Not just is there a need for it, but then if we allowed it, what would be the impact of it? What would be the impact on the neighboring properties, the overall character of the district that we established as a community? Does it meet, those things? Will it benefit the community in that way? Does it cause any potential harm to the community? And then that's where these other criteria come in, the adaptive use, the pedestrian walkway. I think there's also, Kathy, I would add to the staff's recommendations, there needs to be a limitation that if the drive-through there's any attempt to expand the use of the drive-through beyond an ATM, that it has to come back to the Plan Commission. But in any event, I guess my issue is I don't disagree with giving them an indication of where we stand, but I'm hard-pressed to say that there's no need for the traffic study if we all agree that it's approved absent some modification of the building.
And that's what I'm saying, that I would favor it. That I understand what his concern is about use, that it supports his argument that it's not used. I disagree with that function, but I agree with what he brings up.
That it's being used enough to be a candidate for a special use.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's.
That it serves the purposes of the
Although,
B1 district.
As
we
opposed to
planned
being
it
like
that
an
way.
office building for 10 people only that don't want to go downtown.
I move that we set aside the criteria that we've need more information on for future consideration after this petition has been passed to the BRB and gone through their process. And then it'll come back to us for final consideration.
Seconded. Is that clear, Kathy?
To clarify, the public hearing is left open on the issues that the Plan Commission has just identified.
Yes.
Only those issues. So I second it.
Kathy, how do you take that, what do you take that motion to mean with respect to the recommendation of staff to support a special use permit?
I take that motion to mean that this matter is continued, that the continuation is based on the need to more fully demonstrate that all of the criteria are met. As Commissioner Ruggles mentioned, there are a couple criteria that aren't fully met. I also heard Commissioner Freeman, at least from his perspective, the question of need is still open. So adaptability of the building, need, pedestrian links off-site. And again, you are continuing this matter. The public hearing will remain open, but the issues you've identified are the issues upon which you will continue to deliberate once the Building Review Board's work is completed.
And the public hearing will be limited to those items.
Correct.
And in addition to need, it's the use of the other properties within the B1 district. So it's not just need.
Okay. Any debate on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0. I thank all of you who have attended, representatives of the petitioner, those of you who spoke. I thought it was very informative, and I think it will lead to, at our next meeting, the commission taking action one way or the other on this petition. Okay? Okay. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Plan Commission on matters not on the agenda. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward and speak? Sir, did you have something? No. Okay. Okay, then additional information from staff.
I have nothing further.
Okay. Motion to adjourn would be
Motion made.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Say, guys, the city attorney's opinion, take with you. Don't leave it in the trash.
Yeah.
That,
No, that is
this,
good. This is good
this was the
discussion.
coolest meeting I've ever been in.
Yes.